The deepest, darkest secret of my life is that I had a crippling gambling addiction.
I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about the harm I was causing. I didn't care about myself.
And I was up thousands at one point, but it wasn't enough.
The National Council on Problem Gambling says around 2.5 million adults in the United States have a severe gambling problem.
The American people are on course to lose more than $1 trillion of personal wealth. Predatory gambling is America's most neglected major problem.
In September of 2000, I robbed my first bank home, and then it just got worse and worse and worse. Over the course of 14 months from that September till November of 2001, it was 6 more banks and 4 hotels.
Roughly 1 in 5 problem gamblers attempt suicide, the highest rate than any other addictive disorder.
I had 4 attempts. 2 of them were with pills. One was me in a room while I was in the military and literally lowering my head and running as fast as I could headfirst into the wall as many times as I could.
Had my balance up to $11,000, but I didn't stop. I lost it all in the next day.
So the entirety of the situation for you played out before you turned 21.
I'm not even 21 yet.
This video is brought to you by our generous sponsors, Right Choice Recovery and the Campaign for Fairer Gambling. Check the description of this video for more information about Right Choice's services and for the campaign's mission statement. Gambling isn't just becoming normal, it's completely taking over society. Gambling advertising is everywhere. Celebrities are promoting their favorite sportsbook or Celebrities are promoting their favorite sportsbooks or
new customers bet $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets.
Celebrities are promoting their favorite sportsbook or casino everywhere you look. God. You're seeing ads for gambling every time you scroll TikTok, even when you're doom scrolling on the toilet. Your kid's favorite streamer is getting paid millions of dollars to show themselves winning big and showing that gambling is this dream life. And on the business side, casino revenues continue to smash all-time highs, with 2024 being 42% higher than 2018's revenue. Since 2018, 38 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized online sports betting, with many states starting to legalize online casinos. In 2018, 22% of sports fans gambled on sports. But in 2024, that number's up to 55%. In just 6 years, the amount of people that sports bet has increased by 175%. How did this happen?
Bet 10 pounds and get 40 pounds in free bets.
You see, casinos are giving out free bets. And when I say free, I mean free in the same sense that drug dealers are giving out a little bag of Coke to get you hooked to the product. Risk-free bets that say gamble $1,500 and if you lose, we'll give it back to you. But what they don't want you to realize is that it's back in sight credit. And you have to wager that again before even thinking about withdrawing it. And it's not just generic free bets. It's AIs that are trained to provide you with the perfect promotions tailored to hook you specifically in those moments where you think you're about to start slowing down. But we should slow down for a second because you need to understand how we got here in the first place. How did gambling go from something that you and your buddies did twice a year to something that's being shoved down your throat every single day? Gambling's been around for forever, and in the US, it was even used to fund the Revolutionary War when they did a lottery. In fact, Benjamin Franklin was known for saying that gambling was robbery by consent. Over the years, different forms of gambling popped up around the country, like in the early 1900s, when the Italian mobs brought sports betting operations to the back of New York delis. Then, gambling began to explode as it became commercial business by 1906. As casinos popped up in Las Vegas, and then once again in the 1970s when the Atlantic City casinos opened up.
The click of the slot machines.
Early casinos had this high-class feel to them. I mean, you were even required to wear a suit jacket to place a bet in some locations. And then eventually, they even became family-friendly environments that became really popular vacation destinations. But things have changed drastically. Now, we have kids gambling on the toilet, and it seems like everyone around you is talking about their last parlay that missed by just one leg.
I should get some sleep.
It should come as no shock that as more people are gambling, more people will begin to experience gambling problems. In this series, we're going to show the harsh reality of gambling and gambling addiction today, how powerful the gambling industry has become, and what will happen to gamblers in America if nothing changes about where we're heading. I'm in recovery from gambling addiction myself. I made my last bet November the 12th of 2022. And since that point in my life, I've made it my mission to spread the message online that gambling addiction is real. I share my story because I don't want to see people go down the same path that I did. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to reach millions of people every single month with this message.
Rob Minnick used to be addicted to gambling.
Rob Minnick says he went into debt 6 times over the course of 6 years.
25-year-old Rob Minnick says he learned the pitfalls of wagering money the hard way.
For 25-year-old Philadelphia resident Rob Minnick.
On today's episode, we have Rob Minnick.
Rob, welcome.
Thank you for having me on. It started with daily fantasy sports contests online with my friends. By the time that I finished my gambling, I was spinning slots for 8 hours a day, and I had honestly memorized the soundboard of the game I was playing on. I knew with my eyes closed how much each bet had won or lost. I was making over 100 spins a minute, and I went into debt 6 different times because of my gambling, all before I turned 25. If you want to understand how things got this bad for me, you need to first understand what a gambling addiction actually is. And instead of telling you myself, I interviewed 3 gambling addiction experts. Here's what they said. Dr. Tim Fong, the co-director of the UCLA Gambling Studies program.
Addiction is a brain disease. My generation knew addiction as an issue of morality, a lack of willpower, greed. And so it was fascinating to me in medical school to say, well, wait a minute. There are these people that are addicted to, quote, behaviors, gambling, shopping, video games, and they're not ingesting a drug, so what's happening to their body, brain, and mind? All the research that started to come out, neuroimaging research, genetics, biological, psychological research, all started to point that gambling addiction resembled substance use disorder.
Abdullah Mahmood, a gambling addiction counselor from Maryhaven Treatment Program in Ohio.
Disorder gambling is, meeting at least 4 of the 9 criteria that's outlined in the DSM-5, which is basically the Bible for clinicians, to diagnose and treat many people with mental health issues and addiction issues.
Dr. Ken Martz, a clinical psychologist from Pennsylvania who's been working with gambling addicts for decades.
So addiction is an old word that actually means to be chained. When I'm doing social gambling, I'm having fun. And when the fun stops and I'm getting pulled along outside of my will, even after I no longer want to be playing or I'm playing more than I want to be playing, and I'm having to hide it because I'm doing more than I intended to, that's when it's going to become a problem. That can cause problems financially. If it affects my finances, what doesn't that affect? I mean, that's going to affect my work, my leisure time, my relationships, everything.
Now, gambling actually changes the structure of the brain, the same way that drugs or alcohol do. So I asked them about the effects of gambling on our physical and mental health.
There's a lot of ways that it affects the brain. The simplest one is that it activates the neurochemicals that cause us to have pleasure. Dopamine is the fancy term for it. When I get a little hit of dopamine, it feels good. And so I want a little more of that. And so I start to crave a little bit more. And that's the simplest solution, because that then also becomes a withdrawal effect. I wanted that rush, and now I no longer get that rush from the internal chemical of it.
What are some challenges that people who are struggling with gambling face that are unique to gambling?
Finances. What's really unique to gambling than substance use or drug use is that people feel like as though they have that element of hope, and eventually gambling is going to fix their problem. You don't have that so much with drug and alcohol use, to where there's a large element of hope attached to this disease. If I keep on playing, eventually I am going to hit, but how much money am I going to wager to get to that point? You have no limitations on this. I can have a never-ending supply of money, but I can feel like it when I take out personal loans, payday loans, and other avenues to finance my gambling. You have limitations on drug use and alcohol use, to where I will get poisoning. There's a risk of overdose. There's no limitations on gambling. Then you also have that random reinforcement schedule, to where people feel like as though they're hooked. Every so often they get a reward, and as they perpetuate that cycle, they feel like as though they're getting hooked as more of like a dopaminergic response, right? Very similar to drugs, alcohol, and other substances.
When I have a learned behavior that I do again and again and again and again and again and again, it becomes automated in the brain. So it's a little harder to stop once you get in the middle of it.
Wait, so he's saying that the more someone gambles, the more likely it is that they get addicted to it because their brain gets used to it? No wonder we're seeing more people getting addicted. It seems like everyone's gambling nowadays. I wonder what else is causing an increase in the amount of addiction we're seeing.
Isolation, doing anything solo is a concern. The power of the phone, the power of all this mobile sports betting, it's much easier to drive this entertainment activity into solitude. But on the whole, we as humans crave positive social connections. We love it when we're together, but the phone has made it so much easier not to be together.
Why do people still think that they can win? We always hear this expression that the house always wins, but yet people still gamble, thinking that they're going to be the exception to the rule. For slots, you gamble for hours, and you believe that you're due to hit eventually if you just keep spinning. But what you don't realize is that the odds are completely independent of each other on each spin. They're controlled by a random number generator. You're not due to win big. You're due to lose your money. When playing blackjack, you think you have the perfect strategy. Stand on this, hit on that, split on these, and double down on this. This perfect strategy doesn't always work, does it? The casinos are still winning 50.5% of the time, even if you use that perfect strategy. Meaning that if you keep playing, eventually, you're gonna lose it all. And some people truly believe that sports betting is investing, not gambling. But on every single bet, the house has an edge. Many people try to hit big with these huge parlays. But in New Jersey, for example, parlays made up 32% of all sports bets, yet made up 72% of all the sportsbook's revenue. So the casino is definitely the one that's winning big. Even if you're a pro gambler, you'll still lose it all eventually. I mean, take Greg Weber for an example, a pro poker player that ended up losing everything.
I was hooked from the beginning. I loved everything about it. I loved that there was competition to it. A normal guy could make millions of dollars playing a poker tournament. So that kind of got everything started for me at a very early age. Started with $5 games with my friends. And then, when I turned 21, I'm playing $200 tournaments in Atlantic City. Then a few years later, it's $1,500 tournaments. It increased over time for sure. And towards the end, I'm playing tournaments for $3,500 to $5,000 on a semi-regular basis. All of my friends saw the big wins. They saw me on TV playing a poker tournament.
He's not lying. He really was a professional poker player. I mean, here's a clip from him from a final table he was at.
Play because it just called. These guys playing very deceptive poker. Greg with a king jack of clubs not gonna raise.
Nobody ever saw the negatives. Like, they didn't see the damage it was doing to my mental health. Like, my mood was entirely based on if I was winning or losing. I guess that's kind of why they call it the hidden addiction, is because nobody saw the negatives and they only saw the positives.
You would say then that even a professional gambler can develop a gambling addiction?
100%. I know for a fact now, looking back with like a clear head, that so many people that I played poker with had a similar problem that I did.
In 2018, Greg won $471,000 at a poker table, which he then lost over the following months, chasing after the next win. It goes to show that for a compulsive gambler, no win is ever enough. We're always chasing after that next one. And look, sometimes it's not even your fault for thinking that you could be a pro gambler. It's everywhere that you look online, especially for young people. For example, here's AJ's story.
Scrolling through YouTube, TikTok even, you see people gambling and they just promote it. Gambling is good, gambling is this, gambling is that. And you see all these people getting these huge wins and you're like, well, why can't that be me? So I downloaded DraftKings. My mom trusted me to make an account. I explained to her that I don't have a problem and I'll be fine. I just want to use it for sports. Completely lied to her. I started depositing into DraftKings, lost $2,500 in one day. It got worse when I downloaded FanDuel. I'm losing my whole paycheck, over $2,000 a check, and I'm just losing the entire thing. Still chasing that high, trying to make everything back as fast as I can. Now we're into the summer of 2024, and this is the worst of it. I'm driving down the shore, and the billboards, BetMGM. They have a deposit match for $1,500. So I took that as an opportunity to just download that and use that to my advantage. This was a late night. I'm by myself in my bed. What else am I gonna do? So I go into BetMGM and I'm playing a casino game now. And I had my balance up to $11,000. I told myself, this is the stopping point. Like, you got everything back. But I didn't stop. I don't know what kept driving me to keep playing. I lost it all in the next day, and it was just such a hopeless feeling. My parents were like, what's wrong? Like, we're on vacation. And I was, nothing's wrong. No, I'm good. Meanwhile, I have practically nothing in my bank account now. Scavenging around my room, looking for cash, driving to the bank, goes into my account, and I put it right back into the gambling app. I went through DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, ESPN Bet. I was on Fanatics now. I was a caretaker. You know, nobody there knew anything about what was going on internally with me. I took a blank check from the owner of the household. I wrote it out for $10,000 and tried to cash it. Looking back, that was the most disgusting thing I've ever done.
So the entirety of the situation for you played out before you turned 21.
I'm not even 21 yet.
It's not just social media that's convincing you that you'll win big. It's also the marketing campaigns from the gambling platforms themselves. They advertise gambling as the #1 feeling, or something that's gonna help you progress in society. But maybe even more insidiously, there's influencers that profit directly off getting you hooked to gambling, because they make the bulk of their money through referrals. Basically, when you use their code to sign up for an online casino platform, they get paid a portion of your losses forever. So while they say, use my code to get some free money to play with, the translation is basically, use my code to make me a bunch of money and drain your savings. These influencers build massive communities, which basically serve as echo chambers of people motivating each other to keep gambling. Because hey, the big win is only one spin away, right? There's also the psychology that goes into casino advertising at play here. They portray gambling as high status, and in a generation that's lonelier than ever and feeling more behind than previous generations, they pitch gambling as the optimal shortcut to success. And there's even more psychological tricks happening in the design of the games themselves, like the idea of a near miss, a losing outcome that closely resembles a win. It's essentially a situation where a gambler feels like they almost achieved a winning result, but in reality they fell short by a small margin. And it actually triggers more dopamine in your brain than winning does, because it's providing that motivation to try one more time and finally get there. Casinos know that you want to get the biggest payout possible, which is why parlays have boomed in popularity, because you keep almost winning by just one leg. This is how sports betting is slowly becoming the new slot machine. And with the rise of online casinos, it doesn't even feel like you're losing real money. It's more like you're playing a video game and you're losing coins. There are now more games accessible to you than ever before, with thousands of different online games and slot machines available 24/7 from basically anywhere around the world. The real danger of this is that if people gamble more, they become more likely to develop a gambling problem. So look, it should be clear from this that gambling has exploded in popularity in America. But as more people start to gamble, we're inevitably going to see more people get addicted to it. How bad is it actually going to get, though?
About 86% of the revenues online are coming from the 5% of gamblers who are likely to be addicted or at risk.
The majority of the US population were against sports betting, even when sports betting was legalized. But then the ads started coming.
I thought that the American Gaming Association existed to protect the fairness of casinos, to make sure that the players were protected, that the casinos were operating fairly, and the games were as the rules of the game said they should be. I literally could not have been more incorrect if I tried. The numbers, they don't pass the smell test. They're misleading, and I think anyone that reads this should know it.
Struggling with an addiction can make you feel like you're all alone. But trust me, it doesn't have to be that way. At Right Choice Recovery, a family-owned and operated treatment center in New Jersey, we are here for you. And we're dedicated to helping you break free from addiction and change your life for the better. Whether you're struggling with substances or a gambling addiction, this is the spot for you. With personalized care, real support, and a team that understands exactly what you're going through, we're here to walk with you on your journey to recovery. Because recovery is possible. And it all starts with the right choice. Check the description of this video today for more information.
We exposed how gambling addiction is on the rise because of the advertising, the influencers, and social media. Here's the thing. It's not just a culture shift anymore. There's actual numbers to tell you what's happening. Data to prove it. The damage being done is measurable. Big numbers, big profit, big harm. We're gonna show you exactly how bad it's gotten by showing you some of the numbers. But what's really important to remember is that numbers can kind of be twisted and manipulated to have them say whatever you want them to say. For example, according to my survey, 100% of people are addicted to gambling. But my survey was only the team working on this episode. I'm gonna do my best to provide you with the absolute truth, unlike some of the groups that we're gonna be talking about a little bit later on. Official numbers say around 2.5 million Americans have a severe gambling addiction. That sounds really big already, right? Well, remember, the way that we report numbers really depends on who's running the study and what questions are being asked. The reality is there's at least another 5 to 8 million Americans, 2 to 3% at minimum, that are struggling with mild or moderate gambling problems. In other words, they don't meet the full diagnostics criteria to be called severe gambling addicts, but they're going through it.
Some of those criteria being that if you're lying to your family, friends, and loved ones about your gambling, or if you're chasing one's losses, if you're increasing your bet sizes, or if you're preoccupied with the thought of your next bet. Those are just some examples of the 9 criteria that one would have to meet.
But even further, we have to remember that these numbers in particular are measuring people who, 1, knew that they had a gambling addiction, and 2, were willing to tell the truth about the fact that they had a gambling problem. This study on substance addiction highlights how self-reported numbers can be a little bit funky. Programs that rely on self-reported substance use may not estimate the exact prevalence of substance use in both research and primary healthcare settings, especially substances that have a higher social stigma. And the same goes with gambling here. When it comes to gambling, there's no drug test. There's no way to tell if a person has been gambling recently. So it's really just if they tell you or if they don't. It's called the hidden disease for a reason.
I guess that's kind of why they call it the hidden addiction, is because nobody saw the negatives and they only saw the positives.
This means that these numbers could be underreported by 10, 20, 25, 50%, just based on what people were willing to share or identified about their own experience. There's stigma. People lie or don't admit the full truth to make it seem a little bit better. Denial or a lack of education about what a gambling addiction is. People with gambling addictions today might just tell themselves that they're bad gamblers and don't have a gambling problem. It's very easy to lie to yourself in that way because it allows you to keep gambling. And then there could be sampling bias. The people that are often struggling the most are usually the hardest to reach. They could be homeless, they could be incarcerated, they could be out of the general population and struggling with addiction. Basically, experts are just guessing to the best of their ability with the data that they get. One study might say that 1 in 50 Americans has a gambling addiction. Realistically, that could be 1 in 25, could be 1 in 20. And it really depends on the demographic that you're interviewing, because there's groups like veterans that are more at risk to develop a gambling addiction.
I got hooked on slot machines in Korea because that's what was in the rooms. And when I came back to the States, of course, because that's what I got hooked on, that's what I sought out.
Here's the truth. You're 30% more likely to have a gambling addiction today than you were back in 2018. And that's on the conservative side. Are we really gonna stick with the data from 1999 that says 1% of Americans have a gambling problem when 38 states and DC have legalized online sports betting and the advertising's being shoved down our throats? Let's talk dollars. The American gaming industry now generates $264 billion of revenue every year, and that number is accurate. It's actually more than the GDP of Greece. You want more scale? That's actually enough money to buy every NFL team and still have billions of dollars left over. But where does that money come from? Where are they making the revenues from? I asked political activist Matt Zarb-Cousin that question. Here's what he had to say.
It's about 86% of the revenues online are coming from the 5% of gamblers who are likely to be addicted or at risk.
86% is an insane number to come from just 5% of the player pool. Imagine if 86% of all liquor sales came from just 5% of drinkers. News outlets would be going crazy over that. Yet no one is talking about it when it comes to gambling. It just doesn't seem to matter. So it seems like the big bucks aren't rolling in from the casual or responsible players, but rather it's coming from the players who are gambling in excess, possibly those with a gambling addiction. That's targeted harm. And with increased access to gambling, meaning increased frequency of play and more people gambling, we're gonna see more people joining that 5%. That number could grow. But the number that's surely gonna grow is the amount of money that gamblers are losing. 94% of sports bets in 2023 were placed online. Why? Because it's fast, it's easy, it's fun, and there's AIs making it appealing to you and you specifically. And the apps themselves, well, they're built for endless engagement. They're actually built by the same Silicon Valley groups that got you to doom scroll this morning before your feet even touched the floor next to your bed. Before 2018, sports betting was relatively small potatoes. There was $4.9 billion wagered in 2017 on sports, legally. Today, $121 billion in 2023. That is an explosion. And gambling addiction grew right alongside it. And there's lots of other aspects of life that are being affected as well. I mean, the probability of a problem gambler's relationship ending up in a divorce if they got married is 53.5%. I wanted to know what America actually thinks about the rise of gambling, about the rise of sports betting. We usually only get the opinions from the extreme sides, the gambling industry or the people that want to see it destroyed. But what does the average person in the United States think about gambling? I spoke to Dr. Daniel Ledick, a marketing professor from Seton Hall University who's been polling America for years about sports, sports advertising, and how they feel about sports betting.
The Seton Hall Sports Poll is a fascinating deep dive into all things sports. We are not ESPN where we care about trades or drafts. We care about the business of sports, the ethics of sports, and the culture of sports. In 2015, we've had previous polls that the majority of the US population were against sports betting. It was culturally not accepted. Even when sports betting was legalized, it was a slow burn at first. But then the ads started coming.
Oh yes, they did. It seems like everywhere you look, there's an ad for sports, but
we'll make a new bet around every 2 seconds, not only on the game.
Oh, we are not doing this again. And you know what I mean.
It's impossible to escape either an ad in between plays or on-air coverage of the actual announcers talking about odds or parlays during the game, pre-game, and post-game. We do 5 polls a year. Almost every poll we do has sports betting questions on it. We are documenting what's happening over time, and we are looking for trends, and we publish all this freely at Seton Hall University. We need everybody to pay attention and everybody to wake up.
Why is it so important that people start paying attention? Well, first, we need to think about how kids are being impacted. Additionally, people seem to believe that legalized sports betting is creating more compulsive gambling. Notably, a significantly higher percentage of sports fans believe this to be true. The group that's most likely to be betting on sports after all. And more people than ever before believe that we're heading towards a compulsive gambling crisis. And look, people are getting absolutely sick of seeing gambling ads, and that really shouldn't be a shocker. Now, to understand this next point, you need to understand the American Gaming Association. I thought that the American Gaming Association existed to protect the fairness of casinos, to make sure that the players were protected, that the casinos were operating fairly, and the games were as the rules of the game said they should be. I literally could not have been more incorrect if I tried. I want to read you the mission statement of the American Gaming Association. It turns out that the mission statement of the AGA is basically make the casinos as much money as possible, because they seek to foster a policy and business environment where regulated gaming thrives. Gaming is this fun little word they use instead of gambling to make it sound like it's, not so bad. Like a nice little video game with your friends. The AGA publishes a ton of research and puts out a lot of statistics about gambling and gambling addiction. Of course, that research never contains anything that would hurt the ability for casinos to make money, because that would go against their mission statement. They'll actually tell you that, hey, gambling ad spend is going down. And they'll make a big deal about it because, as we just learned through the Seton Hall polls, people are sick of being force-fed gambling advertisements. So they put out this article to make sure that you knew that they were spending less money advertising gambling on TV. What they failed to mention is that TV viewership is also down. And then further, the ad spend is just changing location. It's gone from TV to social media, also to streaming services, podcasts, and then gambling influencers who are streaming. Billions of dollars are still being poured into advertising, but the AGA would make you think that advertising is consistently declining because that makes them look better. Ads normalize, apps hook. Then people lose big, and the AGA's big clients make bank. Numbers really can say anything you want them to say, huh? For our next set of numbers, I want to share probably the most disappointing article that I've read. I want to say up front that I have the utmost respect for anyone who's working in the space of helping gambling addicts. We're out there struggling, and to anyone that's putting in the work, I want to tip my hat that I'm not wearing, and I want to thank you for your service. When we have one group telling you to gamble every day, and if you do it, you'll be happy and successful.
Which is still winning. Still better than number 23. A bear being afraid of you.
And then we have another group that's theoretically their counter messaging, telling us that gambling is neither good or bad. People are never actually getting the message that gambling might be a dangerous thing. The narrative is unfortunately completely shaped by the revenues. People are essentially operating in silos, trying to do the best that they can, but they're limited. But this recent article featured the National Council on Problem Gambling, and I think it did really severe damage to their reputation in my eyes. I guess based on this article, we should stop this video, right? I mean, seems like everything's fine. No one's addicted to gambling anymore. We need to call this out for what it is. It's propaganda disguised as public health research. And the National Council on Problem Gambling just handed the gambling industry this on a golden platter to make them look great. According to this article, the NCPG suggests that gambling harm is going down in the United States. And this is despite an explosion in legalized gambling, a huge increase in the amount of advertising that we're seeing across all platforms, and a well-documented surge in people seeking gambling-related help since 2018. The numbers, they don't pass the smell test. They're misleading, and I think anyone that reads this should know it. Let's start with the biggest lie. They're claiming that gambling-related harm went from 7% in 2018 to 11% in 2021, back down to 8% in 2024. And they want us to believe that this drop happened because people just stopped gambling post-pandemic. And all this while the ads are through the roof. You're seeing it every single day. And more people than ever before are seeking help. I mean, I guess unless you ask the AGA their opinion. If you work in this space or you've been half paying attention to gambling addiction over the last few years, you'll know that these numbers just don't make sense. This report makes 0 sense. So where did NCPG get these numbers? A 4-indicator checklist. Translation, cherry-picked vague metrics that paint a particular picture that looks really good on the gambling industry. We know that self-reported surveys are unreliable. They're underreported. The shame and denial are skewing the numbers drastically. Yet, here we are holding up these 4 cherry-picked metrics without naming them, I might add, and saying, look, everything's getting better. There's an avalanche of data contradicting that, but we're ignoring it. I need you to read between the lines. 38 states and DC have legalized online sports betting, and so many are starting to legalize online casino games. Gambling revenue is literally hitting historic highs every single year. The gambling industry is one of the National Council on Problem Gambling's biggest sponsor. And now problem gambling is magically back down to 2018 levels? What a convenient headline to show legislators, regulators, and the media who are finally starting to question the actions of these casinos. They want to paint this narrative that legalization isn't causing a crisis, that everything's fine. The numbers are stable, nothing to see here. Meanwhile, the people that are being harmed, they're buried under debt. They're seeking resources that are ill-funded. They don't know where to get help, and they're too ashamed to speak up. The gambling industry is controlling the conversation, manipulating the narrative, and using organizations like NCPG to launder legitimacy to their profits. The NCPG's job should be to hold the industry accountable, not hand them the keys to the kingdom. There's so many good people in that organization, and I'm calling on them to take a stand and make a difference. They should be shouting from the rooftops about how normalized gambling has gotten, how much the access has increased, and the need for services and help. They handed the gambling industry a get-out-of-jail-free card with this one. But anyone who's lived through a gambling addiction, myself included, we know the truth. The numbers are worse than reported. The harm is significantly deeper than acknowledged. And the gambling industry is 100% controlling the narrative right now. I want to change that. Millions addicted, billions lost. Casinos are setting records with their revenue every single year. Some say it's just business. Others say it's a public health crisis. So, which side are you on? We're gonna be taking a look at what's being done about the problem in the United States. And we need to finally answer the elephant in the room question that's been evading us all for some reason for the last decade.
Over the next 5 years, the American people are on course to lose more than $1 trillion of personal wealth to these extreme forms of gambling. That breaks down to about $300,000 every minute.
You know, it's always been the American thing to watch sporting events. I think the sportsbooks have taken that away from families.
It's life-changing financial harm from tens of millions of Americans.
Gambling-related harm is reaching record levels, and the protections in place today simply aren't enough. The Campaign for Fair Gambling is fighting back. They're demanding accountability, stronger safeguards, and policies that put people before profits. Learn more and join a movement for a safer, fairer future at fairgambling.com. Linked below. Over the next 5 years, Americans are set to lose over $1 trillion to gambling. Every minute, Americans lose $300,000. There's gonna be a counter in the top left corner, and it's gonna track how much money Americans have lost just while you're watching this video. But how did we let this happen? Well, the states were promised major tax revenues from legalizing sports betting, and that's actually been true. In 2024, states made $15.91 billion in gambling tax revenue. And the bulk of that money came from casinos lobbying to get online sports betting legalized. But what casinos conveniently forgot to mention to lawmakers when they pitched this was the estimated $14 billion of social costs incurred by Americans every year as a direct result of gambling addiction. This comes from things like bankruptcies, divorces, social welfare costs, and things like incarcerations. So to better understand what was going on, we spoke with someone who's essentially the casino's biggest hater, Les Burnell, director of Stop Predatory Gambling.
Stop Predatory Gambling's mission is to tell the truth behind commercialized gambling operators, to prevent more victims, and to advocate policy reforms to take gambling out of the public square and back onto the side of the people. Predatory gambling is America's most neglected major problem. You're paying higher social costs, you're paying higher taxes for this. More than $1 trillion of wealth is going to be lost by the American people over the next 5 years. Larger that portion of that money is coming from citizens who are addicted, but you, the non-gambler, you're having a lower standard of living because of that.
We'll be hearing more from Les later on in this episode, but I also want to introduce you to Brianne Dora Shawwal, who's been involved in both sides of the debate, whether we should or shouldn't legalize gambling in different states.
$14 billion annually is the latest estimate and cost, but in the state of New Jersey, it is $350 million per year from iGambling alone.
If this is a fact that exists out there, how does it factor into conversations about policy when the industry is seeking to legalize new forms of gambling in different states? Shouldn't we have learned our lesson?
Yes, we should have. But gambling policy exists in a silo. See, this is one of the biggest frustrations about our federal government currently not acknowledging or investing in this public health issue. Because gambling policies are determined on a state-by-state basis, it also is leaving the problem gambling policies to be determined in isolation. It is very rare that you will have someone from the problem gambling field be able to testify, well, this is what we're experiencing in New Jersey. You should consider it here.
So then this false promise essentially led to the policies that we have today being passed, but what do they look like practically? Well, in 2018, the Supreme Court ruled that it was up to states whether or not they wanted to partner with gambling operators to legalize sports betting in their jurisdiction. And as a result, 38 states and Washington, D.C. have since legalized online sports betting. We wanted to see who even makes these decisions, what the gambling industry is saying to get these laws pushed through, and who's responsible for regulating it once the laws pass.
Compared to other public health initiatives, the federal government is completely silent and absent from the discussion. Not only do we not research this, we don't invest any money into preventing it or treating it. And that really puts the states in a precarious position because they are left to their own accord. So unless someone is insisting and bringing to light some of the data from other jurisdictions about what happens when you neglect this issue, sometimes we find ourselves passing gambling policies in complete isolation from the problem gambling debate that should be happening, not just alongside or adjacent, but literally inextricably linked to every decision that they make.
Isn't that playing to the hand of the gambling industry to keep growing, essentially? Because if they fail in one place, they can just go to the next?
Yes. I think that policymakers by and large want to do right by their people. They were elected because they were believed in, that they were going to do good to represent the interests of their districts. But the truth is that they're unintentionally enabling sometimes really dangerous policies. And 9 out of 10 times, the industry is the one stakeholder base that is existent in every single market.
It feels like things are only getting worse and that nobody's really even doing anything about it. Is something being done? Well, there have been some attempts at stopping the seemingly unstoppable rise that these casinos are on. Congressman Paul Tonko has introduced a bill known as the Safe Bet Act. The bill's goal is to limit some of the negative implications of PAPSA being overturned in 2018 and require states to meet federal standards on advertising, affordability checks, and the use of AI against the gambler. Here's some of what the bill does. So that your kid doesn't get exposed to something as addictive as gambling as soon as they get home from school, the bill seeks to prohibit sports betting advertising being broadcast between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. local time. To prevent people from gambling money that they don't have, even though some casinos offer their own version of a credit card, this bill seeks to prohibit operators from accepting deposits via credit card. And we know the main way casinos get you hooked onto gambling is by giving you something like a free bet. So this bill seeks to prohibit sports betting advertisements designed to induce gambling with bonus bets or similar promotions. Casinos are even tracking players with AI, so they know exactly how to offer you the optimal promotions, even if you're broke. So this bill seeks to prohibit the use of AI that tracks players' individual gambling habits. I spoke to gambling policy activist Matt Zarb-Cousin to better understand how casinos are using AI against the player.
It's really important to understand how important it is for the commercial model of the gambling industry, particularly online, to have people that get addicted to their products. Then they have information about that individual, how, not just their gambling style, how they interact with the platform, and they don't just use that, it's also where they live, personal information that they haven't really approved the operator to process. All of this builds a big profile of that customer. The game is to extract as much as possible from that person, and then once they've done that and that person self-excludes, then they'll find someone else. Convert some of the 95% that aren't necessarily addicted to gambling into the 5% that drive all the revenue, or they'll find more people that just go and recruit new gamblers. And the most efficient way of recruiting new gamblers in terms of the commercial model of the sector is to target younger people, because those younger people are more likely to get addicted. The brain hasn't fully developed till you're 25.
And look, it wasn't enough just to read about the bill. I wanted to speak to the man who wrote it. So I went to the Capitol to speak to Congressman Paul Tonko so we could discuss why he wanted to bring this bill to life.
My attention to this whole issue was driven primarily by younger folks who were showing me how much advertising was part of the social media out there, how there was this proliferation of advertising and luring in of the individual. And it's no wonder that when we look at things today, you know, it's always been the American thing to watch sporting events. I think the sports books have taken that away from families. We just want to bring it back to be the favorite pastime with families, and that it's got that innocence again. You know, they took a love for sports, a thirst for sports, and they took all those concepts and they poured them into a booking opportunity so that you can wager a bet with a sports book. And now it's like, okay, you're this vulnerable target, you know, and we're going to just saturate you with advertising. We're going to hit your social media constantly. We're going to give you micro bets so you can keep chasing losses. And before you know it, a known addictive product has not been addressed well enough simply by turning a green light on from the U.S. Supreme Court decision and indicating to states you can go do this.
But the casino industry says they have this under control. I mean, don't worry, Congressman. Casinos say they want to see everyone gambling safely. But do they really want that? Let's talk about what they call responsible gambling.
Take a friend, set a limit.
Anyone who can responsibly gamble is not a compulsive gambler. Anyone who is a compulsive gambler, unfortunately, cannot gamble. It is no different than someone who struggles with alcohol, who then eventually gets help. They can't have one beer. They can't have one drink. They can't just drink on New Year's, just like we can't make one bet.
Responsible gambling, in my view, is the collective unified approach by all stakeholders to do everything in their power to mitigate and reduce the harms that inevitably will come for some from gambling.
I don't know either, to be honest. In my opinion, responsible gambling is an out for the industry.
Responsible gambling is a sham. It's a PR campaign, a public relations campaign to give the appearance to political leaders, to media, and to the 2/3 of the public who rarely gambles, to create this impression that somehow we're protecting the American public from this extremely predatory business.
This feels like what casinos are using to shield themselves from blame and shift that blame onto the addict. To be fair to the gambling industry, we wanted to give them a chance to clear this all up. I asked them if they'd like to comment on what responsible gambling is and how they'd like to promote it. They all declined to comment. So we found someone who works as a consultant for the industry from time to time to shed some light on their perspective. What is responsible gambling?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a three-part thing. I think for operators, it's to provide your products and services in a responsible manner. In other words, have the tools. Make sure you're not marketing irresponsibly. Make sure that you've got limit-setting tools. Making sure that you're doing not just what you're required, but hopefully more than what you're required to minimize harm among your users. When we look at the industry and we look at responsibility, it becomes more complex. So there's a lot of subjectivity there. I would say generally they are responsible within the limits of what they're required to do. What they're required to do, that's where the real challenge is. State lotteries who do run sports betting actually are specifically exempt from the Truth in Advertising Act. Casinos are regulated differently than, let's say, sports books in some states. Each state regulates differently. Each state has a different set of marketing restrictions. There's no national standard.
So basically, they tell people to gamble responsibly, knowing that gambling addicts won't. Give them tools which they won't use, and allow them to self-exclude, which they won't do. It puts all the onus on the addict to make changes, and if you have a gambling problem, then hey loser, we'll give you some help. And there's really nobody telling them to do anything differently because so much money is at play.
It's no surprise that maybe they're not interested in really doing prevalence studies or really looking at, has there been an increase in gambling addiction since 2018, when since 2018, 40 states have legalized sports betting.
Are the state legislators adequately educated about gambling addiction?
God, no. No, they really don't want to know because they're holding the bag. In a lot of cases. Yeah, the private operators are profiting massively and they bear a responsibility. They've got a huge role to play too. But it's the folks that really set the rules and that are also making windfall profits. They are public servants.
Why aren't the groups that represent the gambling addicts saying anything? Well, guess what event this list of sponsors came from? Yeah, the National Council on Problem Gambling's most recent conference. The National Council on Problem Gambling and their state affiliates are mainly funded by gambling revenue. And a lot of the events that they put on may even take direct sponsorships from casinos.
So I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people who are in the rank and file of these state councils across the United States who like to sit around a table and try to come ideas around prevention and education, makes everyone feel like they're doing something. We're pushing gambling fentanyl into people's homes and normalizing it, by letting people watch it on television, like they're seeing their favorite athletes endorsing gambling fentanyl. The business model for these gambling operators is based upon addiction. It's based upon identifying people who could be addicts, cultivating these citizens who are being turned into addicts, and then once you're clearly identified as an addicted gambler, just to take you for all you're worth.
In fact, it reminds me of a story from the very first time I spoke about my gambling addiction in public. It was at a conference for the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems. A great conference, but I walked into the room and the #1 sponsor for the event was FanDuel. I thought I was on the wrong side of the hallway or something. Like maybe the gambling addicts are over here, the casinos are over there, but that was just who was sponsoring the event. So we wanted to find out how the leadership of these councils feels about the current way that it's structured. So we spoke to Dave Wall and Heather Martinez of the Illinois Council on Problem Gambling to find out.
My name is Heather Martinez and I'm the Associate Director for the Illinois Council on Problem Gambling.
Dave Wall, I'm the Executive Director of Illinois Council on Problem Gambling. We've learned that all of the affiliates they have different tasks, they have different missions. Our focus is training, so the way we reduce harm is to, the conference we had today, we provide training to counselors.
I think that one of the big challenges as an affiliate of the National Council on Problem Gambling is that you're technically gambling neutral. Would you be able to talk about what that means and how it relates to the mission that you have here?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission, right, is to reduce the harm for those in the state with problem gambling. To me, the neutrality makes absolute sense. First off, we're up against a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry, right? So even if we wanted to be anti, we're just a small player in that and we would never have success. But in reality, I just think the neutrality makes a lot of sense. Gambling itself is an entertainment source. There's 90+% of people that they go, they gamble, they have a good time, and that's that. They go home and they're fine. There's less than 10% that do struggle with problem gambling. With that 10%, we're here to support them. So really, we just want to keep that balance. We want to make sure that as new gambling and opportunities to gamble come out, that there's that balance of those to support those that are struggling.
So what would be some of the challenges and maybe some of the opportunities while maintaining that neutrality? What does that open you up to?
There's a lot of gray areas sometimes, and so really trying to navigate that and not mixing emotions right in our own personal aspect in with that. But I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges is we want to partner with those organizations, but then there's a concern of the motives, right? We want to make sure that we're being motivated by the right things and that we're making the right decisions.
I think the people at these councils honestly have great intentions, and a lot of them do fantastic work. I've done work with them as well. But we do have to be honest here. There's some inherent limitations in their messaging. I mean, they rely on the gambling industry to exist. They hold a stance of neutrality towards gambling. It's not good, it's not bad. And sometimes when a message is too neutral, it fails to have any bite behind it. But that opens up another challenge if we're being honest. If these councils didn't accept funding from the gambling industry, then where would the funding come from? Would it come from a bill like the Safe Bet Act that would include funding for gambling addiction? If not, who will help the gamblers in America?
We've been going through different iterations of the bill based on professional responses that we get from the field. It's been very encouraging to see how many are out there that are taking a science-based, evidence-based approach. People in recovery who've advised us beautifully, where families have inspired us. They have told us to continue this fight because they're concerned about members in their family. You know, the beauty of this place is that if you see a cause that is just, and you know, what could be more just than preventing addiction? We're not doing this because it's easy or it's popular. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, the just thing to do.
What I do know is that if we keep allowing the gambling industry to have a hand in the policy debate, we can't honestly expect any lasting or legitimate change to take place. I mean, they're a business after all. If the groups made to help gambling addicts have to remain gambling neutral, it creates a situation where we're helping those already struggling, but not effectively preventing damage to those that may struggle, because we weren't able to accurately discuss the risks without the funders getting upset. Next, we're gonna take a look at gambling addiction from the lens of public health. Is this the next epidemic that's gonna sweep our nation? Subscribe so that you don't miss the answer.
Thousands and thousands of people who work in the gambling industry who shield their eyes every day from the harm that their business inflicts on the American public.
I honestly didn't believe anybody could help me because nobody would understand it.
Gambling addiction affects you as well, and it affects your wallet, even if you've never gambled before in your life.
I don't believe that there is an addiction to mobile betting any more than there is an addiction to utilization of your phone for any other reason.
So with everything you've seen so far, you would probably think that gambling addiction is on the rise. Well, according to the American Gaming Association, that's not the case. They claim that the only thing on the rise is smartphone addiction. Bill Miller, the president of the AGA, just said one of the most outrageous things I've ever heard on a recent 60 Minutes interview about sports betting.
The addiction element of are people addicted to their phones, which is kind of a common phrase. I don't believe that there is an addiction to mobile betting any more than there is an addiction to utilization of your phone for any other reason.
You don't think adding a layer of betting makes the phone more addictive than just tooling around Instagram?
No.
Les Bernal from Stop Predatory Gambling felt much differently though. Here's what he had to say.
That interview is reflective of someone and really a culture of political leadership and investors in this business who are completely out of touch, people who don't gamble themselves and don't have loved ones who've suffered the harm of predatory gambling. Thousands and thousands of people who work in the gambling industry who shield their eyes every day from the harm that their business inflicts on the American public. On our website, we call it the Hypocrite Hall of Fame. It's a picture of quotes from all of these different governors, gambling executives, state legislators, slot machine makers, and so on, who say, this is great for you. There's no harm here being caused, all these forms of extreme gambling we're promoting. But you know what? I don't gamble myself. But it's great for your family, it's great for your community.
Well, if it's so great, then why isn't there a policy that casino owners have to gamble a certain number of days per year? I mean, that would be great for them, right?
That kind of underscores the big con aspect of this. It's an incredibly hypocritical approach. You know, these guys are entrepreneurs. These guys are driven by greed. It's all being done in partnership with state governments.
We need to remember that the AGA's goal is to maximize revenues for their clients. Their clients are the casinos, of course. If you imagine an association that was created solely for the purpose of making the rich richer, that's them. Let me share a couple stories that illustrate that this is a public health crisis. The first is my own.
For 6 years, I kept telling myself like, oh, I didn't lose that much. It's not that bad. I'm fine. I can keep going. In reality, what the problem was the entire time was the behavioral change that I experienced from 18 to 24. So when I was 18, I did daily fantasy sports with my friends. I'm from near Philadelphia, so we love our teams down there. We watched every game, whether it was a Wednesday night, our family event would be because the Phillies game started at 7, or if it was a Sunday at 1 when the Eagles kicked off, that's when we met up. So when my friends and I found out about fantasy sports, it was a no-brainer. One fantasy sports contest with my friends for $5, $10 turned by the end into me taking out my phone, hitting the 100 auto spins section, putting it back in my pocket, putting my headphones in, and just listening to the sound coming in to find out how much that bet had won or lost. I memorized the soundboard for the slot machines that I would play on the casino app. As soon as the games would end, my friends would go to sleep. I would stay up for the West Coast games. That, about a month later, turned into staying up for the games happening in China and the games happening in Japan. From a fun bet to friends to betting on Chinese basketball, 3 months.
Next, I want to share Adam's story with you.
I grew up in a gambling family, not my immediate family, but there's a lot of gamblers in my mother's side of the family specifically. I grew up playing poker, always being interested in gambling. Scratch tickets were a big thing in my family. I used to love Christmas, where I would get to, if I couldn't scratch a ticket, I would want to sit at the kitchen table and watch my Uncle Rick scratch every ticket he got. I kind of isolated, and I found some people on my floor that liked to play poker, and for the next 2 years, all I did at school was play poker. 5 years later, doing that combined with, a ton of Keno, just gambling as much as I could. I ended up declaring bankruptcy in my late 20s, I think 27 or 28. So now at this point, I'm ashamed, I'm embarrassed, and I really thought I was gonna stop, right? Like, who wouldn't stop after declaring bankruptcy, $30,000 in debt from gambling? And for a couple months I did. The paycheck started coming, that itch starts happening. And I'm like, well, okay, lesson learned. I'm not gonna do what I did before. No cash advances, not that I could get a credit card anyways. I'm just gonna play poker. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna work on a budget. So then I just got back into it. And obviously, knowing now, there's no such thing as working on a budget with someone like me. There's no such thing as small bet experimentation. Once I realized that, I said, well, I can't be around here anymore. The jig is up. Like, my friends and family know I declared bankruptcy because of gambling. If I'm gonna keep gambling, I gotta get out of here. So then for the next 10 years, the last 10 years of my 20 years of gambling, I just bounced around the country. I lived in 6 different cities, had 12 addresses, 20 jobs. It was just me not realizing that it wasn't the location, it wasn't the new job, it wasn't the boss, it wasn't, I just need a fresh start. It was that I just had a problem.
Now, there's people who don't think this is a public health crisis at all, not in the slightest, like Bill Pascrell, a former politician who now works with the American gaming industry to push forth legalization efforts.
Between 96 and 99% of all gamblers in all markets, not just in the US, don't have a problem with gambling. They use it as entertainment, as fun. Put a bet on a game, you're gonna be more inclined to watch the game and kibitz and joke. And that's all safe and fine. The Rutgers University study, the UNLV study, which is continuing, and there's a 5-year study paid for by a client of mine at Harvard. You're going to question the credibility of those academic institutions? I don't think so. I think those are good studies, paid for by who should pay for them? The industry.
Bill works for the gambling industry, so it wouldn't shock me if the research that they put out failed to be harsh on the gambling industry. In fact, it's in the best interest of their clients that it makes them look good. So what? Who cares if gambling addiction is on the rise, right? I mean, it's not like it's drug addiction. That's actually the issue. Gambling addiction is like drug addiction in certain ways. And if things don't change, gambling addiction might actually become the next opioid epidemic. If you remember our conversation from episode 1, we spoke with Dr. Ken Martz about dopamine and how it changes your brain as a gambling addict.
When I get a little hit of dopamine, it feels good. And so I want a little more of that. And so I start to crave a little bit more. And that's the simplest solution because that then also becomes a withdrawal effect of.
Dopamine is the same chemical that gets released in your brain when you do drugs, like heroin. But we don't see mass coverage on the news about gambling addiction the way we do about opioids. Maybe we're just early. In fact, we're so early that right now our news coverage is filled with ads telling you to sign up for casinos and bet your money away. Imagine seeing an ad for cocaine on TV. That's what I see every single day with gambling ads.
Once the drowsiness of a couple beers sets in, you simply take a little bump and let the medication do its thing.
So what's the difference between the two? Other than the fact that one's a physical substance and one's a behavioral addiction. Drug dealers aren't allowed to push their product to millions of Americans every single day. But gambling companies get away with it because they're partnered with states. I mean, who's gonna tell them not to do it? The states are making money just like they are. Another aspect of gambling addiction is that it has the highest rate of suicidality of any addiction. 1 in 5 gambling addicts will attempt to take their own life as a direct result of their gambling addiction. Imagine being in a room with your 4 friends, knowing that when you leave them, you would never see one of them again. That's slowly becoming the reality for too many people. And the scariest part of it is, you would have no idea that they were struggling until after it was done, because gambling is the hidden addiction.
I had four attempts. 2 of them were with pills. One was an antidepressant, one was a back pain medication that I took the whole bottle on each. One was me in a room while I was in the military, waiting to get into trouble and to get disciplined for the gambling I did, clearing a path to a red brick wall. One of the walls in the room was red brick, and literally lowering my head and running as fast as I could head first into the wall as many times as I could. I got hooked on slot machines in Korea because that's what was in the rooms. And when I came back to the States, of course, because that's what I got hooked on, that's what I sought out. With brick and mortar, with casino gambling, you have to physically go to that casino in order to do it. So I wasn't there all the time. I didn't gamble 24/7. Although I can tell you, coming from Pennsylvania, we had a robust lottery. When I couldn't make it to the gambling, I would do a lot of scratch-off lottery tickets. But when I went, pretty much everything that I had in that moment, I would lose. So what I would do is I'd take a certain amount of money to the casino. I'd say, I'm only gonna spend $300. I'd pull $300 out of the ATM. I'd drive down there. When the $300 was gone, of course, I'm going back to the ATM in the casino to tap out more money at extremely high rates until I could not tap any more money out. That's different from today in that if you're sitting on your mobile device, it's so much easier just to deposit a chunk of money. I had to physically go and take out more money, and it was always so embarrassing to stand in that ATM line because I knew at least somebody knew exactly what I was doing. So it's very different that way in that it's tactile. You know, you have to drive there to get there. You're among a bunch of other people who are doing exactly the same thing. So from that perspective, it was pretty easy to hide.
Okay, let's say for some reason you still don't care. You're saying, all right, well, I'm not addicted to gambling. I don't know anyone that is. It's their choice. Why should I tell them what to do with their money, what to do with their time? That's not the argument that we're making here. Gambling addiction affects you as well, and it affects your wallet, even if you've never gambled before in your life.
Taxpayers are paying the price, not just by contributing their hard-earned dollars to gamble, to the tune of $350 million a year in one state in social economic harms, welfare, homelessness, divorce, medical needs. Everybody has to pay the costs to ensure that the people of the state are taken care of. $350 million a year. That's not even accounting for the social harms from all the gambling combined, which is over $700 million a year.
A gambling addiction erodes trust between the gambler and their loved ones, as there's constant lies, hiding the gambling, manipulating to get money. Some people are out there lying to their kids about why they can't afford Christmas gifts this year. Some kids are asking their mom, why didn't dad come home last night? And it's because he was at the casino. The probability of a problem gambler's relationship ending in a divorce is 40%. That number goes up to 53.5% if they're pathological gamblers. And while all of that's playing out, the problem gambler could be draining the savings of their family, fueling the addiction desperately to get that next hit. Because we have the thought, I'll quit after I get that big win. There's so much pain. Like in the case of Rhonda, where she tragically lost her brother Bobby to a gambling addiction.
I am one of 5 kids in our family, and I'm the youngest. My brother Bobby is just a year older than I am. We grew up together. We went to school in the same class all the way through elementary school, all the way through high school. Gambling started with scratch tickets and Keno. He would do that a little bit to unwind. But in 1992, video poker came in, and he started going to a bowling alley to unwind before work, and he started playing more than he should have and became addicted to that he didn't like the way they made him feel. I was newly married and had a young family. We were going to surprise Bobby at his company picnic, so we were getting ready early in the morning just so that we could get up there. We were all super excited to get up and surprise him at his picnic, and the phone rang. The phone call was from my brother EJ, who lived in Portland as well, near my parents. And I answered the phone, and he just said, I need to talk to Darren, who's my husband. I knew at that moment that Bobby was gone.
The elephant in the room question here is, can the gambling industry survive without gambling addiction? If the answer is yes, then there's some positive changes that can be made. But if the answer is no, there's an entire industry that relies on the pain and suffering of the users of its product to survive. And since 86% of casino revenues come from 5% of the players, it doesn't look promising. But here's what Les had to say about it.
Predatory gambling is America's most neglected major problem. Yes, it's a highly addictive product, and millions of Americans are suffering from it. You, the non-gambler, like, you're paying higher social costs, you're paying higher taxes for this. When more than $1 trillion of wealth that's going to be lost by the American people over the next 5 years. Larger that portion of that money is coming from citizens who are addicted, but you, the non-gambler, you're having a lower standard of living because of that. Like, that $1 trillion of wealth, if it was spent on the local economy in a meaningful way, like, there's a multiplier impact of that. Yes, this is a business based on addiction, but the reason why commercialized gambling has been illegal, and it's still illegal, it's not illegal because it's addictive. It's illegal because it's a form of consumer financial fraud in the family of price gouging and false advertising. It's based on identifying people who could be addicts, cultivating these citizens who are being turned into addicts, and then once you're clearly identified as an addicted gambler, just to take you for all you're worth. They're trying to get you to play to extinction until all of your money is gone. How do you help those people who are being harmed the most? Prevention, education, that's not gonna help those people. What's gonna help them is holding these companies legally liable, restricting advertising and marketing, cutting the amount of gambling losses that the American citizens are suffering. Stop selling $100 scratch-off tickets in low-income neighborhoods to people who make $7.25 an hour like they do in Texas. We're pushing these extreme forms of gambling, all being done under this idea that somehow a little prevention education is going to stop all that. It's just, again, it's window dressing. It's irrelevant. It's part of this idea that it gives the appearance that something's being done, but the reality is it's completely ineffective.
It gradually built up over time. The first big loss I had out of my bank account was $100. The next week it was like $150, then $200, and it follows. It turned into my whole paycheck being gone.
So I started gambling when I was 13 years old, and I was actually in my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting by the time I was 16.
I was still thinking about all the money I lost. I gambled all that money, plus whatever else I could get out of my checking account. I just remember for the first time, really, the thoughts of self-harm were so strong. Like, they were so strong.
And if the parents aren't aware and don't know what to look for, then the kids are just gonna keep going until, who knows what happens.
We've been discussing why gambling addiction is on the rise in the United States. This has been affecting people of all ages and all backgrounds. It's time that we hear some stories of people that have fallen into a gambling addiction or have had loved ones go down that path, because we need to illustrate this. We need to put a face to the pain. I talked to Tina. She's been working with adolescents and teens for years, helping them with their gambling addictions.
My name is Tina. I am the executive director of Right Choice Recovery. So there's a lot of kids that figured out how to do offshore accounts, and that's what we see a lot of, right? Because they're under 18. How can I gamble? How can I get this? Right? That's one way, is finding an offshore account. They're gambling through that.
Have you seen even younger clients coming in and presenting with problems?
I mean, I think the youngest we've seen was 13. So what is that, a 7th, 8th
that
grader,
middle school.
right?
Yeah.
So like, we've seen that. We've heard it from teachers.
Whoa, she said 13? When I was 13, I was playing Pokemon with my friends. I can't even conceptualize getting addicted to gambling at 13, and yet, that's the reality right now.
I say to parents often, right, like especially people that are having kids now, right? Think about all the times you go to the restaurant and you put down a tablet for your kid so you can have a quiet dinner and your kid's entertained. And then the kid looks over at you and says, oh, can I buy coins for this game? There's the first introduction. 5 years old, I'm buying things. Then my kid gets older. Now they're in middle school and they have a tablet. They want to buy this. They want to buy this for the game. I need more people.
I also wanted to know what challenges gambling addiction poses to the younger demographics specifically.
Adolescents don't feel the consequences as much as adults because a lot of times the family will bail them out. It's a phase, right? So I'm going to fix that phase and we're going to keep it moving. So there's that bailout, right, that we talk about for adults, like nobody should bail you out. Like we need to do a budget, we need to do that financial plan. Kids don't learn budgeting. They don't know what it is to be responsible with a dollar. They'll never grasp the concept of financial responsibility if they're being bailed out.
We know that younger people are highly impressionable. Their brains are still forming. But gambling addiction can impact anyone at any age, even when you're a fully developed adult. Let's look at how gambling addiction impacts grown men.
My name's Dave Yeager. I am a podcast host, I'm an author, and a speaker. This really was the catalyst weekend for me that made me know that I had to get help. It was a Friday night. I had just gotten paid. So of course I took a few $100s and I took it down to the casino, my favorite casino at the time. Got there Friday night, went in there, started betting, not long before I won, and I was up a couple $1,000s. I couldn't wait to run out of money so I could leave, but I wouldn't leave till I ran out of money. I was in that mode. But finally I ran out of money and I thought, okay, I've been here overnight. Let me go home, let me be depressed like I always am now. I get out to the car, I turn the car on, and I'm hearing this spiritual music. I'm like, why are they playing Sunday morning music on a Saturday? It was Sunday. I was in that casino 36 hours and didn't even know it. And at that point, sitting in that vehicle, I remember thinking to myself, I'm helpless.
Dave's story goes to illustrate the impacts that a gambling addiction can have on your mental health and the extremes that it can send you down. Next, I want to share Sam's story. He faced an ultimatum as he was about to become a father, but he was desperately hooked to gambling.
My name is Sam DeMello. I'm the founder and CEO of Evive. The deepest, darkest secret of my life is that I had a crippling gambling addiction. I started gambling when I was 12, when Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker. I played poker from 12 to 22 in person, and there were big barriers between me and my ability to gamble, like the drive to the casino. And then when I was 23, I discovered online gambling and sports betting. And in the course of probably 2 months, I went from a $5 bet on the Golden State Warriors at a bar with my friends to a $200 bet on Ukrainian ping pong at 2 a.m. on my phone. I spent the next decade or so with my entire life managed around gambling. It was the first thing I did when I woke up. It was the last thing I did when I went to bed. And as I kept gambling, I lost more and more control. I never thought of myself as addicted to gambling because I was working. I had a high-paying job, but internally I felt totally ashamed and totally out of control. I walked into a therapist's office who didn't have experience working with gamblers, and I said, I have this big gambling problem. And they said, tell me about your traumatic childhood and everything you're trying to escape. And that just wasn't my story. I had a really supportive family. I grew up with a lot of people that had a lot less than me. I felt very privileged, and I felt like I walked into a hospital and I said, I'm bleeding out of my head. And they started by examining my feet. And after 6 months of that, I gave up and just decided I was destined to be an addict, and that was my fate. Everything fell apart, my relationships, my self-esteem, my career. And eventually I opened up to my wife, told her about my gambling problem, and through a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes, I eventually got myself into recovery.
Sam was truly able to turn his life around and become the person that he was always meant to be. I'm incredibly proud of him. Adam, the next man that I interviewed, was also in a situation where he knew he had to leave his gambling in the past. He now spends his time running a podcast dedicated to helping others who are going through the same situation that he is. Let's hear his story.
My name is Adam Lyons. I'm a compulsive gambler. I host the Modern Meeting podcast, and I've been away from a bet since February 8th, 2022. I can remember sitting at a Keno slot saying, okay, this might be it. This really might be it, but if this is it, we're going down swinging. And I was up thousands at one point, but it wasn't enough. I end up losing it all, and I end up in a random parking lot in Oklahoma at 5 a.m. I can't afford to buy a candy bar. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna pay these people back? I've had this thought so many times, but this time it was different. This feeling washes over me and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I'm good. I think I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Adam continues to help people every single day. People like Rob, someone who spent years addicted to gambling, racking up an incredibly large debt while also battling other addictions. Here's a bit about Rob's story.
So I started gambling when I was 13 years old, and I was actually in my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting by the time I was 16. Monday goes into Tuesday, goes into Wednesday. There's nothing really to look forward to because you're stuck in that box. And in that box, you lie, you're stealing, you're manipulating. It's kind of a shallow life. So it starts out with, bookies and sports, and then it goes to casinos, then it goes to lotteries, then it goes to, borrowing and fantasy sports and on the golf course and anything you could do to get that rush, that high, that natural dopamine hit that we get from placing a bet. And you start to owe so much money, and you also lying so much that you have to continually keep that cycle going because in your brain, that's the only way out. I did it all, Rob. I tried the lottery, I tried the Keno, I tried the casinos, the blackjack. I've even had the exotic stuff with High and dog tracks. And when you get to a point where you're in that much pain and you realize that you don't need gambling to live. You need your arms, your legs, you need to eat, you need a drink. It doesn't impact your day-to-day life.
And here's Matt, who struggled with a gambling addiction before he even turned 18. He's now become a leading reform advocate in the United Kingdom, helping others who are struggling with gambling to find recovery.
I'm Matt Zarb-Cousin. I'm a co-founder of Gamban, and I've been campaigning for reform to gambling policy for the last 13 years. I got addicted to gambling when I was about 16, and I went into a betting shop and started interacting with fixed odds betting terminals, which were machines where you could bet up to £100 every 20 seconds on roulette. And I found roulette to be an extremely addictive game and played at 3 spins a minute on machines that were very easily accessible. So my introduction to gambling came in around 2006.
Now I feel like people have come to expect that men struggle with gambling addiction, but they seem shocked when I tell them that women also struggle with gambling addiction. In fact, they have so many more issues that are unique to them that are just mind-blowing, but people don't seem to realize it. Here's some stories of women and the specific challenges that they face in recovery. Let's start with Christina's story.
So I'm Christina Cook, and I am the host of the Broke Girl Society podcast and founder of the Broke Girl Society support group.
And what is that support group seeking to accomplish?
So my work for the Broke Girl Society is based on my own experience with gambling. I wanted to create a safe space for women who've been impacted by gambling, whether it's the gambler themselves or their loved ones, to try and better understand how to help support the one that's struggling with gambling. I remember sitting in a machine and betting 25 cents and going through $5 and being like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe I spent my money on something like that. And then it would just progressively, I still kind of remember putting a 20 in and betting 60 cents. So it was like entertainment money, like what I'd spend at the movies on a Friday night. I was still thinking about all the money I lost. So I went back the next day. I gambled all of that money plus whatever else I could get out of my checking account. I just remember for the first time, really, the thoughts of self-harm were so strong. They were so strong. And I was thinking how I could do it. And I was sitting in my car and I went to pick up my phone because I knew I'd have missed calls and all these. And a picture of my mom and my sisters came up on my phone from my sister's wedding. And I just remember thinking, I can't do that to them. They love me so much no matter what I've done to them through this addiction. That moment that something changed in me of I don't really want to die. I wanted to actually live.
And what's the secret to staying away from gambling for almost 4 years?
It's building a life you don't want to escape from.
Next, we need to hone in on some of the challenges that women specifically face in recovery. So I talked to Kitty Martz. She shared her perspective as someone in recovery herself.
I'm Kitty Martz. I'm the Executive Director of Voices of Problem Gambling and Recovery, which is out of Oregon.
Would you be willing to speak a little bit from your experience as to what makes gambling harm unique for women?
We tend to be put in a position to be helpers and givers and do a lot of mental loading, and we've had a lot of unpaid labor, and we've had to have dual roles now in our current economy of both working outside the home and inside the home. I think there's been studies that women tend to do an additional 40 some hours of unpaid labor within families and stuff like that. And with the accessibility being there, that makes us particularly vulnerable.
So 24/7 accessibility strikes again. To further hammer this home, I want to share Elizabeth Thielen's story. She's a former semi-professional boxer whose career ended abruptly, leading to a gambling addiction.
I'm Liz Thielen, and I'm a certified gambling counselor out of Illinois. So gambling was in my life from a really young age. So I had a family that was just really into gambling, and it was just part of how we all got together. There was cards and dice for money. I used to go to the track with my parents and help them pick the horses. I grew up in a house that loved boxing, so you've got the whole boxing Vegas connection. And when I was old enough, that's what we did. We would go to the casinos, we would go to see fights in Las Vegas, and it was just kind of all wrapped up together in family and sport and excitement. I actually had an offer to turn pro on the undercard of Sugar Ray Leonard and Hector Macho Camacho, so I was going places. We held off on that because women's boxing was not yet in the Olympics, and it was coming around, and so I was at at that kind of Olympic qualifying level, so we were holding out for the Olympics or turning pro. My schedule was very kind of caught up, very intense, you know, competing. It's a very like adrenaline driven thing. So my schedule completely changed. I went from working out, you know, hours a day, 6 days a week, no downtime, to nothing. I went out on a loss, so I had my one and only career loss right before the end of my career. So I'm feeling very like lack of confidence. And I remember that when I would be at that poker table, I felt like this sense of importance and action, you know, like we've all heard about action, you know, I missed that, and I could get that at the poker table. For me, more important than realizing that I couldn't do anymore was that I didn't want to. That the way that I had gotten used to gambling and wanted to gamble was really, really sick. If I was honest with myself, what I really want to do, probably still want to do, is to gamble in a very, very sick and uncontrolled way, but not have the consequences. Having that like somehow insight was the thing that did it for me, like, okay, and I'm out. And I've just been out ever since.
It's a well-known fact that for every person that struggles with a gambling addiction directly, they impact directly further 7 to 10 more people. Spouses, parents, kids, friends, co-workers, the list goes on. Relationships can be strained as the problem gambler takes out frustrations and negatives on those around them. Take Sandra, for example. We just heard about her husband, Rob, and his gambling addiction, but how did it impact her?
My name is Sandra. I am married to an addict, a compulsive gambler. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it, you cannot test for it. You know, a gambler could pass a lie detector test, right? Isolation, you know, detaching from life, you know, electronics, you're watching sports constantly, maybe perhaps watching sports teams that you're not a fan of. Those types of behaviors are the red flags of potential gambling.
And when your husband was in the throes of gambling addiction, could you tell that he was going through it before he came out and told you?
At the time, no, I was not aware. We are Yankee and Jet fans. We would watch those games. I never noticed him, watching basketball or hockey or any of the other things that he was betting on. I mean, he really did it very secretively.
How did your husband's gambling addiction impact you?
It comes from both an emotional and financial impact, right? Of course, financially, it can be devastating on many levels. Houses, assets, college funds, right? So there's that piece of it. But emotionally, that's the worst, because when the gambler's in active addiction, they are lying, they're cheating, they're stealing. It's bottomless.
Or let's take the story of Kim, whose son struggled with a gambling addiction.
My name's Kim Freudenberg, and I'm a high school physics teacher in San Francisco. My 22-year-old son is a recovering gambling addict. He started betting around age 11 on video games like Skins and I guess offshore sites, and we knew that he was doing video gaming and skins buying, and we'd see Visa gift cards, and he'd randomly make a PayPal account. We just thought it was some weird video gaming thing, and then it would kind of go away and come back. So we didn't really understand what was happening to him at that point. And then when he went to college, he went down really quickly with more traditional forms of gambling. And at that point, then we realized there was a problem.
And what was the day like where he told you what was going on?
So he had come home from college after his first year, just pretty much had collapsed. It was really terrible. When he was really in action, and he was just horrible and awful and mean and destructive to himself and to us and to the house, and just not my kid. Prior, to this, he was my baby, right? He's my kid. And if the parents aren't aware and don't know what to look for, then the kids are just gonna keep going until, who knows what happens, so I think that needs to change.
With so much pain, why does the gambling industry continue to grow in the United States? Where are we heading as a society? What will happen to gamblers in America if nothing changes? In fact, an estimated 50% of people with a gambling disorder have committed a crime to fund their gambling.
And we lost. And we owed, I think with the VIG on that, we ended up owing 17 grand. And all of a sudden I'm like, I need to rob a bank.
The consequences of gambling addiction are going to continue to grow more severe if nothing changes about the direction we're headed. You hear stories of drug addicts robbing places or people in order to fuel their addiction, or a couple that's gotten a divorce because one of the partners was hooked on drugs. These situations also happen with gamblers, and we have to understand that to understand the severity of gambling issues in America. Gambling addiction often leads people to commit crimes. In fact, an estimated 50% of people with a gambling disorder have committed a crime to fund their gambling. The NCPG estimates that the annual social cost to taxpayers in America is $14 billion as a result of gambling addiction directly. Of course, these social costs include job losses, bankruptcies, divorces, incarcerations. People have even gone as far as robbing banks to fund their gambling addiction. I spoke with a man named John Schmidt who did exactly that. He committed numerous crimes in order to get gambling money.
In September of 2000, I robbed my first bank home. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And it ended up being, over the course of 14 months from that September till November of 2001, it was 6 more banks and 4 hotels. When I was younger, I focused a lot on sports betting and horse racing. When I moved down to Atlanta, I think even up until now, they don't have casinos in Atlanta. They don't have sports betting out in Georgia. All they have is scratch-offs and lottery still. And it's been, I think, been around a little over 30 years. Where did I find my gambling fix at? Well, it was through bookies, my dad included, and through poker games that I would have with friends of mine.
Okay, so now we know that he was mainly a sports bettor, but how did his gambling transition from something that he did for fun with his friends into something that he was willing to commit a crime to continue doing?
Long story short, there was a week in October of '96 where we just got our heads beat in. It was a bad weekend. Saturday college football, Sunday NFL. We were down about little over $8,000. Combined between us. We all mutually decided we're gonna let it ride on Monday Night Football, double or nothing. I felt like the bookie was very apprehensive to take the bet because he understood we were just trying to get out of the debt at that point. But he took it, and we lost. And we owed, I think with the VIG on that, we ended up owing like 17 grand. So the girlfriend that I was seeing, her sister, I was also good friends with just because I was dating her sister for a few years. Her sister was a cop in Atlanta, and she happened to work the robbery division at the time of what happened, and I'll get to that in a minute. And she used to always talk about how they couldn't solve a lot of their cases, whether they were like people that robbed a store, maybe burglaries, robbed a bank, whatever. Listening to her tell these stories, it was just fodder at the time. Like, it's just entertainment, right? Ha ha, that's hilarious. Once I found myself in that gambling debt and desperate, all of a sudden, those stories that she told started coming back to me. And I'm thinking to myself, I remember her saying something like 85% of these cases were like unsolved, and what they were saying in banks in order to avoid like getting things like die packs or transmitters or funny money or whatever. And all of a sudden I'm like, I need to rob a bank. Now, at that point, I'm just kind of entertaining myself in my head, right? As time got closer and me feeling more desperate to pay this money back, those thoughts started becoming much more prevalent in my head and more serious. Like the first week of November of 1996, I actually contemplated doing it. I went to whatever grocery store and I bought nylon stockings, a pellet gun, and latex gloves. I went to the liquor store intentionally to drink this Jack Daniels, to get intoxicated enough to go through with this. And I drive, and this bank's about 2 miles up the road north of me from my apartment. And I go up to the bank. I park behind the shopping center. I walk up. I walk across the road by the Circle K. And I remember standing against the wall of the bank, pull the nylon stocking down, and I walk into the bank. And I think there was a few tellers in there at the time. And I walked in and I said, I don't feel like I needed to say it because I already had the pellet gun out and the pantyhose down, but I think I announced that this is a robbery, you know, and I even told them, again, recalling those stories. I said, I don't want any die packs. I don't want transmitters, no funny money, none of that stuff. Because I was told that they have to listen to you or they put themselves or other people in the bank at risk if they don't listen to those demands. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what was told to me. They give me all the money, and I put it in a duffel bag, and I walk out of the bank, and then I run to my car. Again, I owed money, but I was also more compelled to do it because I was going to Atlantic City and needed money to gamble there too.
Given your experience, serving time as a result of gambling-motivated crimes, where do you see the future of crime and gambling going as more people begin to gamble and likely get addicted to gambling?
I feel like if you just even went and looked at data, you'd see that there's been an increase in gambling-related crimes. Not necessarily, they consider robbery violent, and I'm not diminishing that at all. I mean, it's a violent crime. But there's also other crimes: embezzlement, check writing, burglaries, theft, things that are financially motivated that could very well be connected to gambling and gambling addiction.
John's story is not a one-off story. People become so hopelessly trapped in their addictions that they don't care what the consequences are. They don't care what happens around them. They just care about placing that next bet because their brains have become rewired to think that the only thing that makes them feel good is making that next bet. People commit crimes regardless of the consequences that it might carry. There's so many people that DM me saying that they can't stop gambling because they've found themselves in a hopeless financial situation and their only way out of it is gambling more. They say they'll quit after they get even or they get a big win to pay off the debt, which of course, as something I told myself many times, I know that's a lie. Gambling debt from $65K down to $6,500, and I could pay it all at once now. There's hope. My gambling addiction started 2017. My first experience at the casino, I took home almost $6K. So I'm like, why work? Just gamble. It's quicker to gain money from here. I'll lose, I'll win, up and down, but overall, I know I had more losses than wins. Forward to 2021, where it really got bad. I was hooked up on online betting. I was so addicted, I even took a personal loan just to gamble, working hard for a week, then blow it all on gambling weekends. So imagine the feeling you're working for free because all my paychecks go straight to gambling. I accumulated more than $65,000 debts across personal loans, credit cards, and friends and families. I opened up to my sister about my loans and she told me she will pay for everything so I could avoid the interest and APRs. I worked so hard to pay my debts and my manager saw how good I am, so I was promoted to be a chef, so my income doubles. So whatever your gambling is from, there is hope. Just hold on to your plan and stick to it. Good luck to all and God bless. Gambling addiction is the only addiction where you could tell yourself that you're gonna stop today and 3 months, 3 years down the road, you could still be dealing with the consequences because you could have accumulated so much debt that it takes so long to pay it off. People have been gambling so much in the United States that the bankruptcy rate is skyrocketing. State bankruptcies are up 28% since 2018 when sports betting started to become legalized in different states. It's gotten so bad that people are actively choosing to spend their money sports betting instead of buying groceries at the grocery store. During my gambling addiction, I was consistently being cheap at the grocery store but had no worries about placing a $100 sports bet.
$3.99, $3.90. Okay, all right, let's save that. Let me get a 3, 6, 18, 25, red, first, third, second, third, all for $100 each. Green 0, better luck next time.
Bankruptcies are just one of the consequences of a gambling addiction that could happen. Another is divorce. A 2023 study showed that 53.5% of people with pathological gambling addiction would end up getting a divorce if they were married. All the time we hear that one of the leading causes of divorce is financial problems. And with a gambling addiction, if the money's going to a parlay instead of the family mortgage, it's a clear sign that there's something going on, but it's also not gonna make your spouse very happy.
I'm a 75-year-old senior with a 68-year-old wife. And I found a month and a half ago that I was $53,000 in debt on credit cards. I thought I was debt-free for quite a while now. There was money being put against the credit cards from casinos mostly. Right now I'm lined up to borrow $80,000 at a credit union at 6.625%, 30-year amortization.
Who racked up the credit card bills? Your wife?
Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't know about it?
I wasn't smart enough to keep my nose in the books, and I trusted her 100%.
How long have you guys been married?
13 years. It's my second marriage.
Mm-hmm. And so approximately half the time you've been married, she's been lying to you?
Yes.
Because she has a gambling problem?
Yes.
And it takes time to rebuild after a gambling addiction, so many divorces could happen in early recovery due to financial frustration. After someone loses everything that they had, and maybe everything that their partner had as well, you could imagine why divorce might be on the table. And when your life is falling apart, and you're staring at years worth of debt repayment that you have to tackle, it's no surprise that you might feel hopeless. We learned that 1 in 5 gambling addicts will attempt to take their own life during their gambling addiction. Now, it's often said that gambling addiction in the United States resembles the same trend that played out in the United Kingdom, but about 5 years behind. So we do have a reference point to look towards to see what might happen next to the United States.
The way we've set things up in Britain has been to permit, not just permit, but promote gambling. The policy of the government is to grow the gambling industry, to get more people to gamble and lose money on online casino products. I mean, it's ridiculous public policy.
How many times have we heard in recent years, don't tell me about the UK, I don't care. I'm America, it's not gonna happen. What makes us so different? American exceptionalism can be a wonderful thing, but I'm under no disillusion that there is not a real role and responsibility that we need to learn from others that have come before us.
Yeah.
We aren't different, we are humans. These are the same industry operators abroad. Things aren't going to be different unless we do something different.
If the sports betting happens in the background, great. England and the UK has decades of disastrous side effects from consumers that have been over-targeted, a vulnerable population.
One way that users have been targeted in the UK has been the use of AI to figure out exactly how to hook the players. So how much do the gambling operators really know about their players? Like, how many data points do they have on them?
So they have about 500. That's come out in the recent case that made it to the High Court related to Sky Bet. The judge found in his favour that they were using his data to basically try to get him to gamble more, even though it was clear that he had a gambling addiction. And so they're just using as many data points as they can find on that individual to try to optimise engagement with the platform.
In 2025, the US gambling market is worth over $100 billion. But by 2035, who the hell knows where it'll be? With VR betting, AI-assisted sports picks, and fully immersive gambling metaverses, we could actually see this market explode in size, as it's been growing pretty steadily every single year with the tech advances so far. Apps are already evolving to blur the line between gaming, finance, and gambling. Think fantasy leagues with real money stakes, TikTok-style reels that promote live bets or live slot play, influencers and sports betting cappers pushing daily picks on streams, getting you immersed in real time, and kids using virtual currency that mirrors gambling behavior, like Roblox, or even like CSGO, where you can literally gamble a virtual currency on a crypto casino. This is the reality today. The future of gambling is not just accessible, it's inescapable and inevitable. And I guess the scariest part is that it's being designed that way intentionally. It's psychologically engineered to hook, retain, and monetize users. These apps, these platforms, they're no longer just tools for betting. They are content machines that are engineered to keep you scrolling, wagering, and losing all in one seamless loop. The apps right now share design similarities with the social media platforms that you find yourself doom scrolling on, except a sportsbook doom scroll might also spell doom for your bank account, in addition to the brain rot that it's giving you. These platforms are built like casinos, but optimized by Silicon Valley. Every notification, every bonus, every offer is calculated to keep you chasing, and they're using AI to know exactly when to shoot you that perfectly designed bonus. You are a product to them, being squeezed for as much value as possible. The line between player and product is already vanishing completely. And with every new advancement in convenience comes a darker truth. The pay in 4 parlay might sound like a joke right now, but when we see Klarna and Affirm gambling loans coming in the next few years, I want you to remember this video.
This has gotten to the point that 1 in 5 people with a gambling addiction are attempting to end their own life. Something needs to change. And the sad reality is that it doesn't seem like much is going to change until enough lives are lost, until enough money has been lost, until enough families have been destroyed. If nothing changes about where we're heading, it really is going to be too late for so many gambling addicts out there. Many lives are going to be lost. But hey, the casino's getting rich, right? On an individual level, if you or someone you know is struggling with a gambling addiction, check the description of this video for links to resources that I truly believe could help you. This channel is here to do everything within my power to spread the message that gambling addiction is real, resources are out there. You have to seek them out for yourself at this point, but also that this is a topic that warrants discussion as a major public health issue. We're on the precipice of a crisis. We're about to see the greatest epidemic of addiction the country has ever seen. I do hope to become a part of the solution. Subscribe to become a part of that change that I want to create here on the channel.